War crimes are often imagined as acts committed by monstrous people who are cruel, sadistic, or fundamentally different from us. When we see images of atrocities in war, it is comforting to believe those responsible must be evil, unlike ordinary people. This belief creates a psychological distance that protects us. It reassures us that we would behave differently. But psychology research suggests something far more unsettling. Many war crimes are not committed by monsters. They are committed by ordinary people who had normal lives before the war, with families, friends, and moral values. Under certain conditions, the psychological systems that normally guide human behavior can slowly shift. Step by step, ordinary individuals can find themselves participating in actions they once believed were impossible. Understanding this process is not about excusing these actions. It's about understanding how human psychology works under extreme conditions. Only by understanding these mechanisms can societies prevent them from happening again. To understand why ordinary people commit war crimes, we must explore several powerful psychological forces: obedience to authority, dehumanization, group identity, gradual moral erosion, fear, survival instincts, and social conformity. These forces are like currents in a powerful river. A person on the shore might believe they would never be swept away. But once inside the water, the currents can carry them much farther than they ever imagined. The first step: obedience to authority. One of the strongest psychological forces is obedience to authority. From childhood, people are taught to respect authority figures: parents, teachers, police, and military leaders. In many situations, this tendency is beneficial. Societies rely on some level of obedience in order to function. However, this same instinct can become dangerous when authority figures give immoral orders. A famous experiment conducted by Stanley Milgram in the 1960s demonstrated how powerful obedience can be. Participants believed they were assisting in a study about learning and punishment. They were instructed by scientists to administer electric shocks to another person whenever that person answered incorrectly. The shocks appeared to become increasingly severe. As the experiment continued, the person receiving shocks began to scream. What made the experiment shocking was that the participants were not cruel people. They were ordinary volunteers. Yet, when the authority figure calmly insisted that the experiment must continue, a large majority obeyed. Milgram found that about 65% of participants administered what they believed were extremely dangerous shocks. This experiment revealed something uncomfortable about human nature. When a legitimate authority figure takes responsibility, individuals may feel they are no longer personally responsible. Psychologically, the person begins to think, "I am not the one making this decision. I am just following orders." In war, this mechanism can become even stronger. Soldiers are trained to follow commands immediately. The structure of military hierarchy reinforces the idea that obedience is necessary for survival and coordination. When immoral orders are given, the psychological system that normally helps maintain discipline can become a pathway to harmful actions. Obedience does not always feel like wrongdoing. Sometimes it feels like duty. The second step: dehumanization. Another powerful psychological process that enables war crimes is dehumanization. Human empathy works most strongly when we perceive others as similar to ourselves. When we see someone as another human being with thoughts, emotions, and a family, our brains activate empathy. But war often involves systematically weakening that empathy. Dehumanization is the process of mentally transforming another group of people into something less than human. They may be portrayed as animals, vermin, disease, or machines. Once this psychological shift occurs, harming the enemy can feel less like hurting a person and more like eliminating a threat. Propaganda has historically played a large role in this process. Wartime propaganda often uses language and imagery that portray the enemy as dangerous, dirty, or subhuman. When people repeatedly hear messages that the enemy is evil, inferior, or a threat, their brains categorize that group differently. This is similar to how gardeners treat weeds in a garden. If a plant is seen as a beautiful flower, it is protected. But if a plant is labeled as a weed, it is pulled out without hesitation. The plant itself has not changed. Only the label has changed. Dehumanization works in a similar way. Once people mentally label another group as less than human, moral boundaries begin to weaken. This process has appeared in many historical conflicts and genocides. It is one of the most dangerous psychological transformations. The third step, the power of group identity. Humans are deeply social creatures. Much of our identity comes from the groups we belong to: our nation, religion, culture, or team. Psychologists call this phenomenon social identity. Research by Henry Tashfeld demonstrated how quickly group identity can influence behavior. In his famous minimal group experiments, participants were randomly assigned into groups based on trivial criteria. Even though the group divisions were meaningless, participants quickly began favoring members of their own group and discriminating against members of the other group. This experiment showed that humans have a natural tendency to divide the world into us and them. In wartime, this division becomes far more intense. National identity, fear, propaganda, and shared suffering strengthen bonds, while increasing hostility toward the enemy. Psychologically, harming the enemy may begin to feel like protecting one's own group. In this way, moral boundaries can shift. Actions that would normally feel wrong may begin to feel justified, if they are believed to help one's group survive. The human brain is extremely sensitive to group loyalty. When group identity becomes powerful enough, individuals may prioritize group survival over universal moral principles. The fourth step, gradual moral erosion. One of the most important psychological mechanisms is that change happens gradually. People rarely wake up one morning and decide to commit an atrocity. Instead, small steps accumulate over time. Psychologists sometimes refer to this process as moral disengagement or gradual desensitization. A useful metaphor is the story of a frog in slowly heating water. If the water suddenly becomes boiling, the frog jumps out immediately. But if the temperature rises slowly, the frog may remain in the water until it becomes too hot to escape. Human psychology can work in a similar way. At first, the actions may seem small or justified. Perhaps it begins with verbal hostility, then discrimination, then physical intimidation, and eventually violence. Each step slightly adjusts the person's moral boundaries. Over time, behaviors that once seemed impossible begin to feel normal. This pattern was explored in the famous Stanford Prison Experiment conducted by Philip Zimbardo. In this experiment, participants were randomly assigned roles as guards or prisoners in a simulated prison environment. Although the participants were ordinary college students, the guards quickly began displaying increasingly harsh and abusive behavior. The transformation happened rapidly. Within days, the guards had become authoritarian and cruel. The experiment demonstrated how powerful situations and roles can be in shaping behavior. People often adapt to the expectations of the roles they are given. In war, soldiers are placed into environments where aggression and control may be expected or rewarded. Over time, the environment itself can reshape behavior, fear, and survival instincts. War is an environment of extreme stress and fear. When human beings experience prolonged danger, the brain's survival systems become highly active, while areas responsible for careful moral reasoning may become less active. In dangerous environments, people often prioritize survival. This shift is similar to how animals behave when threatened. When survival feels uncertain, actions become more reactive. Fear can also amplify hostility toward perceived threats. When people believe that the enemy poses an existential danger, extreme actions may begin to feel justified. The psychological narrative becomes simple. If we do not destroy them, they will destroy us. Fear narrows moral imagination. It reduces the ability to see complexity in the enemy. The pressure of conformity. Another powerful force is social conformity. Humans are highly sensitive to the behavior of those around them. When individuals see others engaging in harmful actions, they may feel pressure to participate or remain silent. Psychological experiments on conformity show that people often align their behavior with the group, even when the group is clearly wrong. In wartime units, this pressure can be extremely strong. Soldiers depend on each other for survival. Challenging the behavior of fellow soldiers can risk social rejection or even punishment. As a result, individuals may follow along with actions they privately feel uncomfortable about. This process is similar to being in a crowd moving in a certain direction. Even if you are unsure where the crowd is going, the pressure of movement makes it difficult to stand still. Moral injury and psychological consequences. Importantly, many soldiers who participate in or witness war crimes experience deep psychological consequences. One concept used in psychology is moral injury. Moral injury occurs when a person feels they have violated their own moral values or witnessed actions that deeply conflict with their beliefs. Unlike typical trauma, moral injury is often associated with guilt, shame, and loss of trust. Many veterans struggle with these feelings long after the war has ended. This shows that even when people participate in harmful actions under pressure, their moral conscience often remains present. The human mind can be pulled in different directions by powerful forces, but it does not forget. The most important lesson from psychology is not that humans are naturally evil. Instead, the lesson is that human behavior is strongly influenced by environment, authority, group dynamics, and fear. Under the right conditions, ordinary individuals can behave in ways they would never have imagined. But understanding these mechanisms also means that societies can design systems to prevent them. Strong institutions, ethical leadership, accountability, and education about human rights can act as barriers against these psychological forces. In other words, if war crimes can emerge from ordinary psychology, then preventing them must also begin with understanding that psychology. The goal of studying these topics is not to judge the past from a distance. It is to recognize how fragile moral boundaries can be under extreme pressure. Human beings are capable of both extraordinary cruelty and extraordinary compassion. Which side emerges often depends on the systems, values, and environments that surround us. Thanks for watching.